Hey everyone, Daniel and Chris here from IGN. Now we're going to do a review commentary on a documentary you saw of the weekend at Fright Fest.
I did.
Now it's called Lost Soul: The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Doctor Moreau. Now that's one hell of a title, Chris.
Yeah, I actually had to write it down in my notes because I was worried.
It's a really interesting documentary. Can you kind of distill what it's about and just give people a bit of a angle on it?
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of context. So, Island of Doctor Moreau is a film that came out in 1996 and is famously one of the worst movies ever made. It stars Val Kilmer, Marlon Brando, based on the H.G. Wells story, and it's just a disaster from start to finish. Now, the story behind it was a pretty interesting one that did the rounds at the time. The original director was a guy called Richard Stanley. That man. An English director, I think he was born in South Africa, but lived in England, made a couple of low-budget movies that did really well, Hardware and Dust Devil, and this was his big break. He spent 4 years developing the script for New Line, and then he got the gig. But famously, he was kicked off the film after 4 days.
So after 4 years, after 4 days.
4 days. Went off into the rainforest on his own. He was a bit of an eccentric. And then word got round that he'd actually got hold of one of the extras' kind of animal beast outfits, because it's about humans and animals being spliced together, went back on set with plans to sabotage the film. And so that was the kind of rumour that he went mad and went back and tried to ruin the film, and that's partly why the film is such a disaster on screen.
So this is a documentary of that story?
It's of that story, but then I guess about halfway through, once he's kicked off the film, that story's part of it, but there's so much more to tell which I didn't know about. So it was kind of getting to the bottom of that urban legend, but also just all the issues with the cast. You had two of the great egos of the time cast in the movie, Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer.
Oh, the height of his fame as well.
Yeah, he was coming off the back of Batman Forever, and he could do or say whatever he wanted, and he kind of he accepted the part, and then just before they started shooting, demanded to shoot 40 less days than he was supposed to.
Well, they changed his part. He was originally the lead, wasn't he? Edward Prendick.
Yeah, they changed the role that he was playing, but then on set he caused all kinds of chaos. He was burning extra sideburns with his cigarette in between takes to amuse himself. And that turned the crew against him. And then obviously Brando's not the most easy of people to work with, famously. And he showed up having not read the script. He didn't learn his lines. He insisted on wearing whiteface, and the rumours are that was so that his stand-in could play the roles when he wasn't speaking. And even there's one scene where he's got an ice bucket on his head, and he just insisted on wearing that. He wouldn't do the scene unless they did that.
So it sounds like there's lots of really interesting stuff in the movie.
Yeah.
But is the documentary good in itself, or is it just interesting subject matter?
Yeah, it's a good documentary about a great subject matter. It's not a great documentary. It's super entertaining, but a couple of ways in which it falls down is there's not quite enough behind-the-scenes footage. So a film that I could compare it to, and it's quite interesting, Stanley convinced Mark Brando that he was right for the role by talking about the similarities between Moreau and Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. And you could compare this film to Heart of Darkness, the documentary about Apocalypse Now. They were both disasters, but the Heart of Darkness had the advantage of having Coppola's wife give over all the behind-the-scenes footage that was. So you saw all this happening on screen. Here, there's not a huge amount of stills and footage, so it's kind of you're just going on the talking head. So visually, it's not super exciting.
Is it lapsing into hearsay, or how credible are some of these talking heads?
Everywhere, I think they're very credible because they all seem to agree on most things. There's nothing they could particularly disagree on. Like everyone says, it's actual fact that Stanley did come back on set and do that, and there are stills that are apparently him, but everyone seems to agree that's definitely him. But the problem is, John Frankenheimer, who took over directing duties, is dead. Marlon Brando's dead, and Nelson De La Rosa, the smallest man in the world, who there are some crazy stories about him. He's no longer with us. So you're lacking 3 people, through no fault of the filmmakers, key people. But equally, David Thewlis, who was cast in the film at the last minute.
He took over from the Val Kilmer role, didn't he?
Yeah, he took over from Rob Moreau, who was... I'm getting confused myself, but in terms of who was cast at the time, he took over from Rob Moreau. And Rob Moreau is in it, the guy from Northern Exposure, and he's very funny. But Thewlis refused to take part, which is a shame because at the time he talked a lot about what went on.
Yeah, and I think he said he's never seen the film.
Is that right?
He's never seen the... He didn't attend the premiere at the time. He said it was one of the worst experiences of his entire professional career.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask...
But I was just going to say that the person who's really missing is Val Kilmer.
Right, of course, yeah.
But you can kind of see why. But equally, it would be nice to get his side of those stories because it's pretty anti-Val Kilmer.
So I was going to say, that was my question. Does the documentary have a strong voice, or is it more presenting an objective state of affairs?
Yeah, it's the latter. I mean, there's a strong Kilmer hating going all the way through the film, but that's because he upset everyone in the production.
Yeah.
I think John Frankenheimer said that if I was had to make a Val Kilmer biopic, I wouldn't cast him. That's how bad it got with him.
It sounds like some of his behaviour is pretty deplorable.
Yeah, but it's the fact that it's 20 years on. There's no real bitterness there, even from Richard Stanley. It's kind of quite a nice. It's just all of them trying to understand the madness that enveloped this movie,
which in itself is about madness.
Yeah. So yeah. It's like Russian dolls going on. But so although there's not a huge amount of depth to it, it's hugely entertaining and really good fun. It's a great fun watch, and it would play as a good double bill with Heart of Darkness.
So what's your final verdict on it?
I am giving it an 8 out of 10, and I would thoroughly recommend it if you like those movies about bad things happening on film sets. There's a hell of a lot in this one.
Wow, that sounds pretty awesome. So I'm not going to say all of that again, but read that. That's out soon, is it?
Yeah, no release date yet. It's coming out sometime in 2015, I think.
Okay, cool. So for all things fantastical, horror and anthropomorphic animals, stay right here on IGN.